Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming into the session, Data Governance and Organizational Change Management, Establishing Long-Term Adoption. My name is Chandana Gopal, and I'm a Research Director at IDC and the track producer for this session. Just as a reminder, if you wouldn't mind silencing all your devices for the session, that would be great. We will have time for Q&A at the end, and the online attendees can submit their questions through the platform, the Hoover platform, and we'll take them at the end of this presentation. It is my pleasure to welcome Donna Burbank. She is a recognized industry expert in information management with over 25 years experience in data management and enterprise architecture. I look forward to hearing her presentation, and welcome, Donna.
All right, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining. So I've been doing this for about 25 years now, before data governance was talked about as much as it is now. So you're in a great place. I'm suddenly hip after 25 years. People are talking about what I do. So a little bit more on my background. I run a boutique consultancy called Global Data Strategy, and we, funnily enough, do data strategies globally. So we help a lot of international companies with their data strategy, and data governance is a big part of any data strategy. So I'm not going to talk about strategy so much in this, but I will in the sense that when you're trying to get alignment and get a business alignment for your governance, strategy is a big part of it. Don't want to talk about me because there's a lot of content in here, too much, but also did a stint with some of the tools vendors in the data governance space. Data modeling was a big part of my background. Irwin, Your Studio, if you're familiar with those. The good pieces of those are mine. All the bad things that are wrong with them are somebody else. Kidding. And I've also done consulting kind of both here and in Europe for many, many years. So that's me, written a few books on data management. Big fan of DAMA International. If you're not a member, you should. It's a great organization around data. I also have a regular webinar on a group called Dataversity, and they have a lot of free online content as well. So I have a monthly series on data architecture strategies, and data architecture is kind of the cousin of data governance, or more that technical side. So hopefully some synergies there that might help you either today or after the conference. So it'd be great to meet all of you individually, and I know there's a bunch of folks online. Just so I can understand the audience a little better, there's always this kind of, and I know there's a lot of chief data officers here, but if you had to sort of self-identify as either IT or the business, which I know is always like really broad, who here would be more on the technical or ICT side? Just show of hands, okay? And who's more from the business? Yeah, I know that's broad. About half and half. And sorry, it's harder to do that online, but that's why you should come here to lovely summer Boston. So great, I hope that helps. And one more question, and then I will start actually giving some content here. Who, show of hands, already has a data governance program in place? That looks probably about 75%. So we're sort of data-driven here. It's a bit manual, right? Manual process there. Okay, well, great, that helps just to kind of get things going. So we are going to talk about data governance, but less on the bits and bolts of how to do data governance, but more on the buy-in and the championing. And I've been doing this for longer than I want to admit, and I'm proudly a technical person. I kind of grew up in the technical ranks. But the longer I've been doing this, what really makes a technical data, a good data governance program that's successful isn't that you had great data lineage or all your metadata values line up. It's the buy-in, and it's getting the culture and the champion. And I am a full-fledged, get the t-shirt introvert, but it's all about the people, right? So how you get the people coming along for the ride is either going to make or break your program. So that's really where we're going to kind of go heavy on that today. Why are we here? And unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard about data-driven business, right? What I like about this picture is they're all business magazines, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, right? So if your CEO is asking about data, that's probably why. Do they know all the details of data? Probably not, right? But there's a lot of momentum. And I will say, and I won't keep talking about being old, although I guess it's top of my mind. I've just been around for a long time. And when I used to go to these conferences 20 years ago, one of the big things people said, oh, we never get the attention from the business, no one cares. And now I'm like, be careful what you ask for, right? You have the spotlight on you. So how you can show success in ROI, just like the business has to, and we'll talk more about what the business is. The other one here, and I've been hearing in this conference is data quality, and there is a data quality typo here. The data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. I think that's chief data officer is what they meant to say. But we'll give them that. They didn't know. Or data architect, or whatever you are. We'll get to fill in the. So again, this is a slide I like to, actually was passed to me from a client. And again, it's not from CDO Forum or CIO Journal. It's from the World Economic Forum, a business-driven organization. And what they're saying is that now, in the world of the economy, data is more of an asset than any product or that you was sold. So when they look at the market cap of it's a little dated, of companies back in 2013, the biggest value was the stuff they sold. It was Walmart, Exxon. Now, when you look a little closer, yes, you still have Amazon. They sell things, but how do they do that? Through data. They've got a great data. I was talking to someone from maybe in the room, Walmart, the other day. Why is Walmart big? Because they've got great data, right? Or Alphabet, Google, they are data. They literally are a data company, and we'll talk more about that. So I was excited to see that because I am a data person, and it isn't just us data people in a data conference talking about data. It's everywhere. I mean, we always kind of joke when you're at a party and people say, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a data architect." That goes over big. But now it does. Oh, data? They might not get everything. Oh, you do AI? Sure. It's close enough. But everyone's talking about data now, and then again, that's a great bandwagon to be on. And when you're trying to understand data governance, that's a huge part of getting that buy-in. I like to make the distinction when we talk about a data-driven business between business optimization and business transformation, and you may do both. But really getting that distinction and what do we mean by a business optimization? You could argue that we've been doing business optimization since the beginning of time. I full-on am a data nerd, and I'm proud of that. I went to the pyramids of Egypt, and some of the hieroglyphs are like they're counting grain, which was an early dashboard. They're counting things and that was a data-driven business, right? And that's almost why numbers and language started, is so we can trade and sell stuff, right? So this isn't a new concept. So how we can have a dashboard, even if it's a spreadsheet, to improve efficiency, to grow revenue, that's kind of a known thing. Can we do that much better now with all the tools we have and the big data and cloud and new dashboards and AI and all that? Absolutely. But I do think what is becoming new is this idea of becoming a data company, right? Where your product is data, or you're monetizing data, or you're doing a spin-off company through data. A Google is a data company, right? You could even argue that Amazon is a data company, or Uber, right? They're a taxi company, or are they really a company that really monetizes data in a clever way and has cars as kind of an afterthought, right? And I've worked with both kinds of companies, and some do both. We worked with a big, I'll talk about them later, a manufacturing company in Latin America that were very closely aligned with building houses. And that market goes up and down, and so they didn't want to have those up and downs. So they thought, what kind of data do we have that they could monetize? I thought this was a neat one. We all know Google Maps, where I used it the other day when I was trying to find something out here in Boston. And they had from all the sensor data from their trucks, so they were using on the left, what's the big cost of the big trucks they drove to ship? Is it a safety issue? Are they going too fast? Are they using too much fuel? And then all that sensor data they use as an app to other people in the transportation industry with big heavy trucks going on back roads in Latin America, and kind of made a Google Maps for the trucking industry, which was really neat because can you go over that bridge with a big truck, or is that road open to big trucks, or what's the best way? So it wasn't a massive part of their business, but it was kind of a neat example. Their business was manufacturing. To mitigate the flow of manufacturing, they had kind of a spin-off, and they were looking at a lot of other ideas as well. And that's an idea of optimizing your business or creating a brand new business from data. And a lot of the startups in Silicon Valley are really thinking on the right. So what does that have to do with data governance? Lots of parts of data governance. This is the data governance framework we use in our practice, but I'm sure you have something similar. What's relevant to this presentation is the top and tail, really. That are you aligning with the vision and strategy of the company? If yes, governance is a lot easier to sell. And do you have the culture and communication around that? That's why it's almost the top and tail of the sandwich. Do you also need a good, strong org and people and data stewards and data owners, good both business process and data governance processes? Yes, each one of these could be a session in and of itself. I'm not sure what happened to the icons here, but data management, data governance. I started by saying, data lineage and your data types aren't going to make or break your program. Does not mean they're not important. I kind of grew up before data catalogs were super hot. We called them metadata repositories, and that's what I kind of did for a living. So yeah, absolutely important, not necessarily what you lead with. And then tools and platforms, and there's probably some tool vendors here, and I used to be one, but I will just, you can even quote me on this, please do not start your governance program with what tool do I buy. Like that's, data governance is a program, it's a way of working, it's a culture, and there are tools, plural. And I know the good news, a lot of the vendors are trying to jump in that bandwagon. We're a data governance tool, and they're probably all right, but it's a plural, right? A data modeling tool is a data governance tool, a data catalog is a data governance tool, a Word document with a policy is a data governance tool, right? So great that the data governance is now hot. I'm older now, and it's great, and I've been doing this for 30 years. What cracks me up is that I'm accidentally hip. I keep saying that. I was in a client, and I mentioned data governance, and this young kid out of college said, oh, I know you fancy consultant use these cool buzzwords now, like governance. I'm like, I'm a cool buzzword. When did that happen? And then now I see it more and more. Like, that's great. That's awesome. I've been doing it for 30 years, but it's a buzzword now. People finally listen to me. But anyway, we will talk a lot today about vision, strategy, culture, and communication, because that's really what's going to drive all that other stuff, which are also important. They're the pillars. You have one of those pillars is not there, the house is going to tip. But you also have to have that foundation and then the roof to keep things going. Oh, this was supposed to be a build, but I guess did not work. But okay, this meme is a little bit old, but I'm going to use it anyway. Everyone had that meme of, what do I do for a living? What my friends think I do in the upper left. You're kind of a geek that's always on your computer, and they're not wrong, right? But that's not when you say you're a data governance professional. Really, what you want people to think of, kind of the one in the upper middle, what my mom thinks I do. Data governance, kind of like a librarian. You manage data and then organize things. And my parents do know the word metadata, but I don't think they have any clue what I do. What society thinks I do, you're one of those weird data scientists, sexiest job of the 21st century, up there doing like experiments on data or something. I don't know, but it looks weird. What you don't want is this one in the lower left, what my coworkers think I do. You guys are just the people that yell at us, right? And it's sort of, and a lot of talk at this conference that I've heard, do we change the name data governance to something else? I'm going to be neutral on that one. I think just changing words for things is starting to annoy me because we just keep not changing what we do, but having a cutesy word. There I go. I got one fan. But I can see the word governance can also have a bad rap. But this is what you don't want to do. Why we have a whole session here on getting buy-in. You don't want to be the person that just seems like you're yelling at people. I had one of my clients in London that said, I'm so excited to be the data governance head. I can now tell people what to do. Like, Mike, we need to have a talk. That's not going to be. I think there was a talk at the Coast Guard I heard yesterday. It's like, there's also the misconception, you're in the military. You can just tell people what to do. He's like, yeah, no. What planet do you live on? No one just likes to be told what to do. What I think I do, I'm the governator, right? I'm saving the world from mismanaged data, and you're really excited about it. But is everybody else? And we'll talk a lot about that, getting everyone else. And we actually did have a client that wanted to have the job description be the governator. That didn't work either. But anyway, what you actually do is you are driving the success of the business. Data drives the business, right? So I'm finding less and less pushback to having data governance, right? You have a finance team because money drives the company. No one questions that you have a finance team. You have an HR team. And actually, in the past, HR didn't used to be a thing. It was just something people did in the business until human resources became a thing. People are an asset. You manage assets with human resources. And yes, they create cute names for themselves now. It's talent and culture or human development, right? But it's still whatever you want to call that, is still a function. So I think more and more data as a function doesn't seem so crazy. Hopefully 20 years from now, they'd be like, really? You didn't have a data department? How did you manage? Got it. Okay, so anyway, kind of a fun way to think about it. I mentioned the Data Management Association before. There's a data management body of knowledge. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great tool. It isn't a how-to guide, though. It is a guide, right? You don't just read the book, and then that's how you do your data governance. And I'll talk about that. You really have to customize it to your culture. I do like their definition, though, of what data governance is. You might wonder about my funny pictures. It's the exercise of authority, control, and shared decision-making. And to me, and you might have noticed my brain is a little different than others, I went right to that's kind of the yin and yang, right, of there is authority and control. So yeah, at some point, you do have to tell people what to do. But there's also that shared decision-making where it's a little bit of a softer, let's all do this together, teamwork kind of thing. Because some of these definitions are soft. How do you define a customer? There is no one answer to how you define a customer. There's a lot of nuance to that. And so And I'll argue with that. If anyone disagrees with me, there are many differences of a customer. You just have to explain them, right? So again, there's a bit of the carrot and the stick of, the stick being, yes, at some point we're going to get regulated, and you don't get to pick how you calculate total revenue to report on a public company to the street. Like, those are kind of defined. But there's also some nuance of how you want to do it, and you got to get people motivated to do this. So that's kind of the carrot and stick. The need for governance should be obvious. I probably don't have to convince you folks here, but hopefully some of these, if some of these are obvious to you, it might be a good way to help explain to other people, right? And this type of slide often goes over really well. The classic, and I've heard this even in the hallway, reduce risk, increase opportunity, that defense versus offense. Yes, who was doing data governance early? Financial institutions, government, folks that were highly regulated because you had to. I would say that's why we also have finance departments. If we didn't have to, I'm sure a lot of companies would just be like, sure, I'm not going to tell anyone my books, wouldn't that be nice? But that's just not a thing. You wouldn't even think of that here. Offense, though, is do we think of that when we're thinking of data governance? If data is an asset, how? And I think the business gets that a lot better, right? I need these numbers to trust. I'm looking at the dashboard. I want to make sure they're right? Do they always want to do the work to get there? Maybe not, but they get it. I remember I was trying to sell one of these data catalogs, metadata repositories to the business. Like, it's going to tell you where your data came from and how it was calculated and all that. And she's like, you mean you don't do that? That's kind of scary. Like, we couldn't get away with that in finance. How much money did you make last year? Some. That's really hard to calculate. You want me to actually know where all of the receipts are in the company? That's going to take too long. They're like, uh-huh. And I think we're getting there with data that you can't just say, I don't know where this number for total revenue came. Good enough. Good luck to you. You can't do that. So, but the more you're making decisions on that data, that I often feel that, we can talk about ways to have those quick wins to get data governance to kind of have that light bulb go off. And you want to do this carefully, but sometimes building the dashboard on the bad data, because human nature is human nature. You can go to your stakeholders and say, the data quality is wrong. Did I have this report and we profiled it? And do you know that 26.2% of all customer addresses are wrong? And then, okay, weirdo, sure, that's interesting. And then they look at the report by sales by region. Well, that's not right. These addresses are wrong, so how can we? Well, I'll help you fix that, right? But until people actually see it for themselves, sometimes putting out a less than stellar quality dashboard, that can also backfire, right? So you need to do that carefully, but people have to see it. Approving efficiency. We often come in as consultants and we kind of start out with interviews, and because we're data-driven people, often do kind of analytics on what people said, and we rank it. More and more in the past year and a half, when we just say, what are your challenges? What are you looking for? We've always had things like data quality, and people would kind of talk about that. It's not a surprise. I would say 3 customers out of 5. What do you want? Number one thing is we want data governance. Like, with those words, they don't kind of, tiptoe around it and say we want better quality, we want better collaboration, or everything. They say we want data governance. And generally the people who say that, who are people who came from another company and had data governance, they're like, it worked so much better. You don't realize, it just shouldn't take you 3 weeks out of the month to get your report to the board together. And I'm not surprised by that anymore. Insert big company here, insert company around the country, around the globe. So many companies are still running on inefficient processes and data. So the efficiency one is an easy one to sell with governance, how faster it can be. And then collaboration and accountability. I may be naive and I may be a Pollyanna and glass half full kind of person, but very few exceptions to when we do a workshop where we get something where everybody cares about. We're going to improve efficiency or help health outcomes or improve student retention. And you get the data in front of you, generally people try to work together to fix it, right? Or they didn't see it. One of my favorite ones, it was a big aerospace company, and we did a process model of who puts the data in. It was for a master data management, who puts the data in where. Nobody realized that when they did the payment, they were having a problem with payment terms for their vendors, and it wasn't right. They were not losing money, but they weren't getting money as fast as they could. The person who put the payment terms in here for 30 days, somebody else was changing it down here and setting it for 90 days. And literally they didn't know. And it was as easy as, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well then you'll update it and I won't. Like that, maybe that's an extreme example. They just didn't see it, and people don't always see the downstream effects. So generally I think people are adults and they're trying to do the right thing. Often I've heard the phrase, we're incenting the wrong behavior because people do live in their silos, and both of those people are trying to get their job done and do it in the best way. So governance kind of prompts that cross-functional, where people often don't have the permission or the time. Imagine that person in finance says, boss, I know, we have to get all the vendor contracts together, but I'm going to start a cross-functional committee to look at payment they'd probably get fired for that, right? So often, and we'll talk about this later, people are really happy to have someone like you come in to help them with it because they don't have time and they're feeling the burden of it. They're working weekends to have this stuff be fixed. So another way to think about it, and this isn't new, I didn't come up with this idea, but are you more on the offense or defense as a company? And a lot of what you do, I have a whole presentation on this, of your job is sales, really, and you're going to have to do the sales pitch. Often when I do a workshop, I have everyone kind of be Shark Tank and sell their data governance program to the sharks and see who would win, right? But you need to think of that. Not that I've ever made a mistake in my career, but had I, it might have been something like this. Think of your audience, right? You might already get the idea that I'm kind of more here, like offense and opportunity, and isn't this exciting? But think of your audience. So are you a Silicon Valley startup where you have new AI-driven widget of the century, and you're going to get there and go, well, guys, I know we can make $40 gazillion billion, but did you know that our customer addresses aren't clean? Like, they're going to laugh you out of the room, and no one's going to have you in that meeting, right? The same thing, you're talking to an actuary in insurance, or someone that's the chief risk officer. Like, it's going to be big, and we're going to monetize all our patients' data and sell their health information, and we'll be rich, and I hope someone gets a little worried about that. So think about it when is your company more offense-driven, or is it more about regulation and risk, or most likely somewhere in the middle, kind of this purple situation. And then also think of who you're talking to, right? Probably if I'm talking to sales, they tend to be more offense and everything's big and huge and we're going to be awesome. Again, legal, risk. I mean, I find that kind of fun now. The same company, depending who you're talking to, are going to have a very different attitude. I would say, and I probably offend everybody here, I have a bunch of stereotypes I'm throwing out there, but often people in IT, we're incented to find problems, right? And we can kind of be the Debbie Downers of the conversation. Well, did you know we don't have lineage? And you may be right, but just think of your audience. Can it be the opportunity? If we had clean addresses, think of all the marketing campaigns we could build, and we could segment by region and zip code. But the only problem is we don't have postal code. So could we clean those up? It's going to go over much better than I have this Bing report with data profiling. So just think of that. So quick show of hands for people in the room. For your company, let's just make it easy, not individual people or departments. For your company as a whole, who feels your company's here more on the offense side? Maybe 40%, 50%. Who feels you're more on the defense? The other half, 40, 60, I'm feeling. And a couple in between. Probably a bit here, probably depending. I hope you're a little bit of both. But something to think of when you're trying to sell your governance. Because again, the name governance kind of puts you in the, hey, we're all in the defense and the risk and don't get in jail. Yeah, you can say that kind of stuff. It's not going to necessarily get people excited. I had one customer, sorry, I'm probably going to go late because I ramble. Love me anyway. It was a company that was in the news for a breach, and they had a customer, and they breached customer data, right? Terrible. You don't want to do that. They lost millions of dollars. But, and they had us come in to help. One of the things we really did well, they were cleaning up the customer data, and at the same time, can we make that a positive? So they actually asked the customers what they wanted to do, and they actually made a lot more personalization. It had to be an online gaming company, and they were pleasantly surprised that most gamers wanted their online persona. It was the first customer that an avatar was PII. I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm not a gamer, so that was like news to me. But they actually, as long as you were trusted, that they wanted to give as much, because that was their online life, right? And so they actually gave a lot more. So it was establishing that trust, started out as a defense, turned into an offense. So anyway, there's stories there. So what a good idea to do is look for these business value levers, right? We talked at a company level, but are there smaller ones? Hey, there's a marketing campaign coming up. Hey, we can help you with getting customer contact information. I know I keep using that one, but that's an obvious one for ROI. Do we even know who our customers are? Do we even have email addresses? We work with an insurance company that didn't have email. They had always sent, they were old enough and storied enough in the industry, they always sent physical mail. Like, that's not going to work anymore. Another quick, I always had a boss, are you rearranging the desk chairs in the Titanic? Maybe not the best analogy nowadays, but what you're doing is fine. And I often come in to kind of help failed governance programs, and I often see, hey, we just bought data catalog A, and we've scanned in 40 gazillion thousand data elements from every system across, and I'm like, and so what? But next year we're going to have 5 million gazillion data elements. I'm like, who cares? Like, and can anyone find that? So much better to have a targeted something that you have the ROI from, and often that's hard to realize. And we all do this. You go home to your partner, your family. It's like, hey, this other program's getting all the information, all the attention. Why? Answer that question, right? It's always fun to vent. And I had this hit over the head with me. I came home to my partner once when I was doing the, I was in a product company. And this was the conversation. It was, the backup and recovery software, they're the cool kids, and they get all the attention. And he's very blunt, and he goes, that's the only sentence in the world where backup and recovery and cool kids would ever be in the, like, there's nothing inherent about backup and recovery software. So he kind of hit me over the head of why are they getting the attention? Well, maybe they made more revenue, or maybe they're having a new hot. So what can you do to either align with the cool kids and help the cool kids, or be one of the cool kids by focusing on what the business is trying to do? And that's sometimes just a mind shift, because it's fun to vent. But if you're not the cool kid, what you're doing is inherently cool nowadays, right? People do care about data and data governance. So are you talking to the right group, or are you offering that group the right value? Again, none of this is rocket science, but it's, I remember when I worked for that aerospace company, I kept saying that, and I realized I was in a room with rocket scientists. And they're like, no, it isn't, and we do that. But sometimes when I think, and I'm not sure what happened with the icons, I apologize, but just think of there's generally 4 areas when we're trying to show ROI or benefit of this. You're either decreasing costs. I find this the absolute easiest one to prove with governance. Go around, ask all your future data stewards how much time they spent. You will find heroes spending weekends cleaning up data or trying to get the data right, and they're probably really happy to see you. That can help. Increasing revenue is a little harder, but it can be done. We had one nonprofit that cleaned up some data for address data. Next year, tracked how many of those people who their address data was right gave donations, and for them it was like $100,000, which isn't going to break the bank for a huge company, but for nonprofit, that was like literally we cleaned up data, we got money, right? I've had more profit company marketing is often a big one. I'll talk about this later. We had one, it was a restaurant chain. Marketing was our biggest proponent of governance, and they actually went to the board with us, the CEO level, and said, we stand up and say, we'll get this much more revenue if you help us with this governance, because we can't run the campaigns with the data we have. That's kind of an extreme, but there are people that will do that, right? Reducing risk, I won't talk too much about that. That's kind of obvious, right? You either have regulations, but there are probably areas you don't think. Product traceability, we work with a lot of food and restaurant chains. If you do have a either an allergy or something wrong with that, you have to trace the lineage. Data breach we don't always want. But it's also kind of that reputational risk. And there's if you're not on the kind of total data geek threads of crimes against data is one, and I will ruin you, I've ruined all my friends of things that happen that are really a data issue, like my bank, my credit card that sends me a credit card statement still in the mail every month, even though I ask them not to, and also an ad for that credit card basically every month, and they can't seem to figure out I'm the same person, right? Just makes them look bad. Or who doesn't have, I get some still like, hey Mike, I'd like you to, I'm like, I'm not Mike. They have the wrong name, or they spell my name wrong. Are you gonna? I still have that credit card, but it does hurt your reputation. That's a big one. Or you can get lawsuits and things now, right? But do people trust you? I'll give a good example, and I think when I have this good example, it's good master data management. But the only place anyone cares about me in this world is airlines, because I travel all the time because I'm a consultant and I'm a gazillion million miler. And I was trying to book a flight online from Denver, where I live, to London, where I go a lot, and I couldn't do it online, and they said, call the desk. And I call, and they say, Ms. Burbank, is this about the trip you're trying to book from London to Denver to London, and would you like the same trip you took last month? And can we just book it to the credit card you have on file? I'm like, yes, thank you. And it could have been creepy, but I knew they had that information. It was actually a very positive customer experience, right? And I will stay with that airline. Everyone loves to hate the airlines, but I kind of like my airline. They should know that stuff, and they put it together really well. So anyway, but we often think of the negative ones that don't work that smoothly. Don't forget this one. We often do. Often when I ask, why you think it's going to fail, is apathy, right? Or inertia, or moving that big ship. But the risk of doing nothing, and kind of don't forget to quantify the things that are wrong, because when you fix them later, time studies are nice. This is how much time these groups are spending doing the wrong thing. This is how much money we're losing. Even, I had a couple of customers still send out big mailings, physical mailings to people. Often that's because it's really important, sensitive stuff that you have to mail out, and it's big and thick, and just the money cost on things like that. Like, there's so many things if you think outside the box a little bit. My favorite one, I am totally venting, and I will stop with my stories. You will probably put that in the notes. I tell too many stories. But hopefully some of them stick with you. We had one, it was a membership company in Wimbledon area, outside of London. And they had a data cleanup. They didn't. I'll give someone a quiz that can come up to me later of why you think this happened. And it was they send out their membership, like the magazine. Like my college still sells me the actual book, the magazine. I still kind of like that. This one lady, after they did the data cleanup, had 26,000 magazines sent to her house. Right? And I'm just thinking of all the data governance from the person loading that up in the truck that nobody noticed across all of those things, that the same lady got 26,000 magazines. So that was data governance gone wrong. That had nothing to do with that slide, but it's a good story. Okay, the other thing when you're trying to sell data governance, again, not that I've ever done this wrong, but had I done things wrong, it would have been this. So I'm giving you all my secrets. I talked about offense, defense. The other one's heart versus head, right? We talk a lot about, revenue and selling things and more money, but are you a nonprofit, right? Or are you a university that's trying to help students? And will that go over really poorly? Even nonprofits have to be, I had one customer, we can't do the mission without the margin. Like, you still have to keep the lights on, but, we're a university and we can make way more money from each student if we don't have books anymore. They won't learn as much, but think how much more money that might go over badly, right? Or, the same thing of, I'm going to probably offend someone with this, I don't know, an insurance company. Yes, you are trying to insure and help people if they lose their home, but be like, well, we should give away the insurance free because Joe has a house and 3 kids and here's his puppy. You just kind of look funny against the actuaries kind of telling that story. If you've met actuaries, who's an actuary here, anyone? Not the warmest, cuddliest. They're very numbers driven, right? So, sorry, I'm online. I'm gonna get anyway, I think that's a known stereotype, so I'm not making up new stereotypes. But think of that, and it's probably both, right? And with each company, when you're talking to finance, you better have numbers, and if you have numbers, they're going to ask about those numbers, and they better be right. Don't just kind of do an ROI study. See what they do for their ROI studies. One of my biggest successes, I got the spreadsheet from finance, filled it in with 3-year projections, with OpEx, CapEx, all of that, the way they wanted to see it. They're like, thank you, you thought this through. You get the funding. No one else did, right? Just think about that. That was what they wanted to see. Or am I a pharmaceutical company that's probably some people here and some people saying, hey, we just cured cancer for 30,000 people this year, right? So think of that, and then think of who you're talking to as you're selling governance and data. So another show of hands, who thinks their company, not your department or you as a person, who thinks their company is more of a heart-driven group? About 5%. Who figures it's more head-driven by? Okay, you may be right, because a lot of you are for-profit. I would say, if you had to pick, head with some heart-driven anecdotes to tell the story, right? Data quality was, actually, we lost this much money, and then Mary, we sent her the 20,000 magazines at our house. Isn't that ridiculous, right? People remember stories, even if you are kind of that head-driven organization. A couple case studies just to hit that home on both heart versus head in different cultures, because we'll talk a lot about culture. This was a retail company, unnamed. They sell big, high-level end products, high value and high word of mouth. They have a really loyal group. They were head-driven, and they were, what do you call it, the opportunity-driven, right? They wanted to make more revenue, they wanted to make it faster, and they were totally driven by that. So coming in as governance they weren't overjoyed by that. They knew they had all these problems with data. So what we picked, and we actually went to the stores and we talked to the people. The sales reps were, I kid you not, we walked in and we did kind of that secret shopper thing of, I'm going to buy this product, and by the way, we're the data team. You're the data team? No way. We are so excited to talk to you. Kind of look around, that hadn't happened before. But they had been tracking all these analytics about the customer, how they buy, and they wanted marketing to see that. This person buys with their head. This person buys because their friend said it. This person buys because they love the feel of the product, right? And they wanted that sent back to marketing. But what was happening, we picked one small thing as a quick win. They would give the email address to the sales rep here. And I don't know about you, but usually it's goaway@stupid.com because you're the sales rep and I don't want to be bothered. But then generally they would buy the product, and when they're trying to get customer support or get the product linked to their house, they gave the correct address, but no master data management, no governance. This company actually had 2 master data management systems. Figure that one out. They was still at goaway@stupid.com or whatever it was. They were good enough that they would call those people and get the right address because they really like their customers, but the customers were like, you look ridiculous. Back to that reputation. I will give you my address, but I already gave you my address and I should know this, right? So what we did with governance, long story short, we just did a month kind of a sprint and we did everything right. We just picked email address. And we did system architecture diagrams, we did data flow diagrams, we did data models, we did all of the right things. And explained how email address didn't flow correctly across the system. My 2 favorite quotes from this, one was the head of marketing. She was a little spitfire lady, like she was definitely gonna change the world, and she goes, I never thought I would use the word, what is it, data flow diagram, but you're the first person to explain to me why my campaigns aren't right. And she actually started an initiative that all of the architecture diagrams had to be printed on the wall. And when IT tried to say, but when things change, you'll have to reprint it. She goes, well, that's on purpose, right? You don't just change. They also had a problem. Somebody here, a data administrator, changed the product code, shortened the product code from like 12 to 10 brought their website down for 3 days. And so there's like several things that led towards governance. So the head of marketing forced data. They had a whole like war room of data architecture diagrams. And my very favorite one, head of sales, basically said, shouldn't I govern my guys, so when they get the email at first that they get the right one, and maybe we can incent them as part of their commission program. Like head of sales is trying to get their folks to actually do data governance. So why? Because they saw the benefit. We just picked something small and we showed the benefit of email address, customer experience, revenue, and then why, right? So don't be afraid to do your technical diagrams. Just tell the story with them. And I do that all the time, a conceptual level or a logical level of just showing how the data flows at a high level. Business loves those. One more, and I think they may be on the call, so hi if you are. Starfish Family Services, they're my favorite one to talk about because it's cute little kids. And we don't often think about nonprofits or social services type things with data governance. We work with them, like 6 or 7 years ago now, doing a data governance assessment. On this side, how do we, quote, sell? And they got a grant to actually do data governance for like 6 years. When I saw the connection of children that they're trying to help, they do a Head Start program. And that connection between children and their education and their family and their physical and mental health in their community, to me, that was a data model, right? But when I sold to the board, it was how do we help these children and families, and how do we do that through data? And the light bulb went off. They're doing amazing things now with data warehousing and data governance and analytics and MDM, all about how do we help families. So that's definitely hard, but they also have finance, right? So how do we keep the lights on? So kind of a fun success story, but a totally different model of governance than anything else. So some lessons from those stories. One of them is to find advocates across the organization, and you will. A lot of people maybe not understand what they need to do. I get that a lot, right? So I'm a little different because I'm a consultant, and I get a lot of folks from the C-level say, I know I need it. I know I need data governance. I know I need it. I don't know what it is. Like, what do I do? I know you don't have to convince me. I know I have quality problems. So that's where you can be. And this may be hard for us, like back to my friend there in London that said, I want to be the head of data governance so I can tell people what to do. I did convince him that was a really bad idea. One of my most successful programs was that marketing company I talked about, where they were the champions and they sold data governance. I didn't say a word, right? So it was getting other people to be champions for you. And that may not be human nature, but that's a big part of it. Principles, right? And I, as a techie person, used to roll my eyes at data governance principles, and is that too academic, and who gives a care, and why do we do this? And I found these to be one of the first things you do as your committee, what are our principles? Something as simple as data is a shared asset. Well, is it? Can I share patient information or student information? What can I share? What can I? And it comes back to these are our core values. And all the time, we had a really heated meeting at one of the customers, and IT was arguing with marketing, was arguing with, one of the heads of IT got up and he said, can we go back to those principles? Well, that one surprised me because it was one of my first times actually doing the principles. He's like, we said we need to protect our patients' data, and that's why I'm yelling at you. Not because I'm a bad person, because it's going against our core principles. So it's like a nice way to say this is why we're all doing this together and doing it together. Not you as the data governance lead creating it for people, but maybe creating a draft, and people is one of the first things to do. And always revisit these. Another part that's super important is organizational structure. How yes, you need some sort of committee or cross-functional group. And yes, you need data stewards and owners, but how you do that is different with every company. This is kind of so when we come in as consultants, we take a look at how this is your organization. Do you have finance agent? We often look at the org chart, and that's kind of how we start. But also how it's structured. I talked about the DEMA DMBOK. This is almost classic. You have a steering committee and a governance committee and working groups and things like that. Absolutely fine. We do this a lot. Nothing wrong with this. This might not work for your company, and I use an extreme example because it really hit home with me. And I'm kind of throwing out stereotypes in here, everyone also, but I was surprised by this. So this was a manufacturing company in Latin America that made big, heavy machine equipment. So I was thinking, okay, manufacturing, very process-oriented. It would be something like this. So we can, and we often even just tried to match the colors and logos of the company and everything. So it was a very almost looking like this. And I was the only woman in the room, a bunch of guys, and they're like, and I was the only North American person in the room, the only American, and a bunch of Latin American guys. And they're like, well, this isn't going to work. First of all, it's very North American. Like, you're very top down, like, the boss tells you what to do. That's not how we work. And we want, I was surprised by this one, we want more concentric circles, and can we use pastel colors? I was like, okay, this is not what I expected. So they created this, and they said, we want more of a data innovation council. We want to work together as a team, and they called it their data governance flower. Wouldn't have expected that, but it worked, right? And they said, we want, instead of like working groups in my previous one, they wanted more agile kind of sprint. So we get together, it's more informal, it's more agile, and yeah, I wouldn't have expected that. But that was and that worked. They're super successful. They're in the news of all the great things they're doing. But again, the previous one did not work with and they were, because we were kind of friendly, they just came out and said it. Will people come out and say it, or do you have to kind of intuit that yourself? So think about that. Does the word committee incite fear, or do people kind of expect that? You need cross-company, or I hate to do it, but I started this by saying don't use cutesy words, but I've done it. So it depends at what level. I think when you're doing data governance, it's the data governance committee. You are doing data governance. Sometimes at this steering level, we had a customer up in Canada, a big insurance company. My sponsor was trying to get people to join the executive data governance steering committee. No one wanted to do it. They're all too busy. We called it the Data Innovation Council. Everybody wanted to be on it. It was the same thing. We were talking about the same things. What do we do with data? But it was, down here, you don't want to, at some point you have to make the rules and govern it. But up here, you really should be more strategic. So maybe it did make sense to change the words. No one says it's all. There are different roles. This is a data governance type conference. A lot of talk about that. So probably not teaching you anything new. So I'm just going to do this quickly. But just think about it in the sense of not what these roles are. And I don't know what happened to the people cut in half. But business data owner should be setting the high-level rules. Data steward are the low-level details. Don't mix the two. Often, I had one client. I don't name the names when I pick on my previous client, but they're things that people have learned from. Literally said, we had all our executives going through our master data match rules, and we would have all our executives go through like 1,000 customers a day to see who the match was. No one wants to come back and do that again. We couldn't get by it. I'm like, kidding, I wouldn't want to do that, right? That should have been a data steward, not a data owner or an executive sponsor. So that's some things like things kind of go awry. The other part of that, these are part-time roles. They should be. They are a data steward or a data owner because they are in finance or marketing or operations or supply chain, and they know the supply chain, operations, finance data. Don't hire data steward. I keep seeing more of that. You don't hire a steward. stewards are made. They are a steward because they're stewarding finances data. You may hire a data architect or a metadata lead or something like that, but these folks should be from the business, except for technical. Maybe that's like your SAP owner or something. Data governance lead should be full-time. Data architect should be full-time, and probably your data security lead. The other ones are part-time roles. Data stewardship, I talked about that. They're often found, not made. Again, we do formal interviews when we come in, and I'm not surprised anymore. You always have Jane or John or Joe who have spent their weekend. They're like, thank you, we want to be part of this because we're fixing the data now, and they know the data, and they do exist in your organizations, and they will be your champions. So find them. So I do want to get into organizational change management because that's a big part of a data-driven culture. Started this by saying I'm a big data techie geek. And so I came late in my career to change management, but I'm a complete convert. And I've also found that a lot of the tools I have as a data person, models and diagrams and practices, work really well with change management as well. So I do data strategy for a living. And I still like this quote, that culture eat strategy for breakfast. You can have the best strategy, but if people aren't bought in, it's not going to work. You got to bring everyone else with you. So when you look at organizational culture, it's really the personality of the organization. And again, we as consultants do this as a first order thing. We're very conscious of, am I at a school or a Wall Street trading company or a pharma company or it's going to be very different. And so aligning with your culture is super important. Don't just come and say, this is how data governance is done from the book. It's not going to work. What are people excited about? How do people work together? This one really hit home with me, and maybe it's just obvious, but sometimes it's just a checklist. When you're doing change management, you're changing hearts and minds, right? So anything you had to do that was new was probably scary at first, right? I have something new. We don't like change as human beings. We think we do, but it freaks us out. So should I even, and we're inundated with a million different things every day. Is this something I have to care about? Should I worry about it? Is it going to poison me, or is it something that's going to be really neat? And then you start to hear everyone talking about it. Like, think of recycling. I never did that as a kid. Then I heard about it, and I'm like, well, why? Why does it matter? And then I go to a party, and everyone's recycling but me. They're all putting their cans in this different bin, and I feel kind of silly. And then I understand that, hey, I save money. I don't have to pay my trash bill when I put it in the recycling, or hey, I went swimming and saw a lot of plastic, or whatever. How is this going to affect me? And then it becomes so embedded. Maybe I'll use my phone, because every time they do an upgrade of the phone, I get all upset. I hate this feature. Why'd they put it in? And then you're like, oh, right, that is super easy. How did I not ever live without Google Maps or whatever, right? So think of that. For you, you're all excited about governance. For everybody else, even though when they act, remember I said the best proponents of champions of governance are people who have done it at another company, but that's not people's day job. So remember that as you're building the change journey. And for me, I've also found there's different communications across each one of this, with even what data governance is, how it's going to help, the why. Before I notice, and I've done this myself, we tend to jump right into literacy and education, and this is how. And we kind of skip the why and what's in it for me. And I kind of say, embrace your inner teenager. Like, why do I care? Why do we have to do this? Like, answer that. Just like, why would someone care, and why do they have to do that? Like, you need to answer that, or they're never going to get into the knowledge. And then don't forget to reinforce. We tend to do this too. I'm building this catalog, and I built it for finance, and then I go off and do something else. Like, are you still engaging with finance and still showing the wins, or to tell other people, about those different departments that are doing great things? So that one really hit home with me. And a lot of these next ones are kind of dense for reference, so I'll go through them kind of quickly. Again, when you're doing a change management plan, and when I mentioned my data architecture background helped me, plan it out. This isn't a thing you just kind of do. You should have a change management plan. You should have one for each different person in the org. And it starts at both the individual level, and each department, maybe marketing's bought in, but supply chain does not want to talk to you. Why? And think that through. And then Mary in supply chain is excited, but Joe is not. Why and what they're like. And then at the project level, well, how could each project be helped with that? And then the organization. And you need messaging at each one and really kind of tailor that. And when you go through, there's, look it up if you're having this whole certifications around organizational change management, but do a stakeholder assessment. There was one customer we worked with, they had done everything for governance. And there was still some group, they had catalogs, they had master data management, they had roles, they had responsibilities, and some people just weren't bought in. So we had a lot of sugar one morning and a lot of coffee, and we just kind of we erased it after, but a stakeholder assessment. What's Mary and why is she what would make her excited? She wants to look good in front of her boss. All right, we'll make her look good in front of her boss. What's Joe? Joe just doesn't want to work very hard. All right, well, we'll make his like you. We were just really brutally honest, and it really helped. Right, so go through what is each person, right? And how are we going to communicate to them? It's going to be different for each group. We're going to have different knowledge and coaching plans for the C-level than for the person in data entry, right? And don't forget the resistance management. Why would people be averse to this? It might have nothing to do with you. It could be, hey, we had a big change last year and I'm done with change, right? Could it not have anything to do with governance altogether? Which leads to this, and we look at this a lot. Are people, like everyone says they're busy, but are people really busy? Don't pick right when there's a big, we're doing one big customer, they're having a big digital transformation, and everyone's stressed out and busy. So what do? We said, here's how we can help you. We can clean up the data as you're moving from SAP to the cloud, right? So, people are busy. Or is there something in the past, I always ask this as a consultant, have you had past changes and what worked well and what didn't? So learn from that, right? A lot of it has nothing to do with you. How is the power structure? What do people value? Is management bought in? Are they going to be proposed? All of that, just think through. And don't forget your marketing, right? Don't only do the marketing. It's always fun to have the t-shirts and things like that. But plan that out. Don't have data jargon. Keep it with the business. Here's an example of a communication plan. And I do want to quickly go into the roadmap. And it's going to keep the questions short, but I apologize. But this is important. A roadmap isn't just a laundry list of things. It's the who, what, where, and when of your execution strategy. So align with a vision, right? And a lot of folks says there isn't a vision in my company. They're all disorganized. Well, I don't know, you're selling widgets. Use your imagination. They want to sell more widgets. Or have you read the annual report? Have you really looked? And then this is a big one, and then I'll wrap up quickly for questions. Tell the story. It's going to be hard, and you really, as part of the change management, is having that vision. We're going to climb Everest. We're going to be the first set of chief data officers to climb Everest, and it's going to be hard. We're going to be cold and wet halfway up, but we're all with the sense of excitement and journey, because governance will be a journey. So again, it's not a laundry list. I often like to create themes. Theme 1, we're at base camp. We're just trying to get trust. And then we're going to go halfway, then it's going to be growth, and then we're going to get into innovation. So each group of these areas of the roadmap is going to have a different theme. Don't just have stuff. And then these quick wins. One just quick thing, I don't like the word quick win. A quick win isn't a quick fix. It isn't just a bunch of stuff we do. It's a planned, architected way. It's the first step in the building block of the building, right? So it should be something, I'm setting up a catalog or I'm setting up data quality as a first step and more, not just something willy-nilly. I often do a kind of one of these, I often do this in a workshop. What's going to be high benefit, low risk? Have people self-identify. Often people know already that things are hard, but they're willing to do it, or there's some easier way. Maybe we need to do customer master, but we're going to start with address validation or something. Align with other roadmaps. I mentioned if there's a digital transformation or something big coming up, be aware of that. Again, governance is one thing along the journey. And then this is just something I've learned along the people are really weird about roadmap. Look at other roadmap. Everyone has their own way of visualizing one. And I've noticed management, if they want to see it this way and then you show it this way, I would just look for some examples. There, some of my scars I'm going to share with you. So yeah, I'll open up for questions. Just in summary, lot to data governance, but telling the story, getting the buy-in is going to be a big part of it. We do it for a living. If you ever need help, come find us. So yes, we will open it up for questions.
Well, thanks, Donna. That was super practical in your approach. So if you have any questions for Donna, just wait for the mic.
So regarding change management, that has become very popular in companies. And so how do you recommend that HR has change management, marketing has change management, data people have change management, and so on and on. And so how do you see this getting rationalized so that as an individual employee in a company doesn't really begin to hate change management?
No, I mean, that's a great point. There's a lot of other, I would say align with them, right? Even who, if there's another change management, it shouldn't feel like change management when it's happening to you, right? That should be one thing. It should actually be, I actually had one group actually put up, these are our change management initiatives to the people they were talking to. Like, that kind of kills it, you know? It's like trying to go to your spouse. I'm going to try to convince you of something, and these are the 3 points. Like, you've kind of lost it there, right? Or if you're not the first one and there's another campaign aligned with that, they have a theme or t-shirts or a way, or they're having a launch aligned with that. So I think 2 things. It shouldn't feel like people are having change management done to them if you're doing it right. And if there's other campaigns going on, try to align with that so people don't, like you said, people are going to feel like there's too much going on. Just be aware of that, or time it. Either join them or maybe stagger it so you're not competing.
I think that's similar to the question online, which is how do you deal with change saturation?
Yeah, that's a big one. Change saturation. I would say the big one is be aware of it, right? Might get my personality. I want to have a big launch and all these things. Maybe people are tired of launch, and then maybe I say how I can help. You guys are really busy with this other thing. We can help you by cleaning up the data or getting involved. So just be aware. You should be a change agent by helping. So the more you can feel like it's less work for them and not more is kind of a big one.
Any other questions?
I think we're running late, and I apologize. But I'm around the rest of the day if people want to find me, and you know I'm passionate to talk about this stuff. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
There was one more that came in just after you wrapped up. How do you help with change if people are not